Hey folks, how is everybody? Yeah. All right. That was for those of you who know, that was Fela Kuti's son, Sean. So Fela Kuti is a Nigerian musician of some renown. He was so famous at one point that they jailed him. They put him in jail because he wasn't a friend of the regime in Nigeria. But that's Sean Kuti. Thank you for being here. Glad to have this chance. I've been wondering what to talk about. But there's been a long-standing thread for those of you who have been able to go to a lot of these conferences. There used to be some conferences in Seville, at the IPTS, the Institute for Prospective Technological Studies. And then there were these WFSF conferences, and there were the World Future Society conferences, and there were the Association of Professional Futurists conferences. And I have to say that I felt in all of those circumstances, in all of those events, and all of those wonderful moments when we could connect and share and experience and get a sense of where people were at and get the mood for the aspirations, the hopes, the fears, for reasons which are probably somewhat suspicious, at least from my point of view. I always thought, how could we be more effective? How could we do more? How could we not just repeat on the grounds that what we'd done before and what we were doing now wasn't really acceptable. It wasn't good enough. And those of you who know that I'm, you know me, you know how suspicious I am of better, of improving, of, colonizing tomorrow with my idea of what a good future is about, so that, I can tell my children, you should live like this. Yeah, sure. But also how ideologies and teleologies in the past and the imperative to plan have, I think, been massively destructive. So you'll, I hope, sense the paradox or the conflict within me when I talk about the idea of improving, enhancing, ameliorating the futures community, futures thinking, the way we exercise our futures capability. But nevertheless, consistently over this time, I've seen a movement, change. I've been able to witness change. I don't know if I've been part of making the change. I really feel that it's mostly been the world around me that's been changing, and in some senses, I'm just keeping track and telling my story with respect to the world around me as it interacts and entangles with me. But nevertheless, that kind of testifying is something that's gratifying and agreeable for us humans who want to testify together, right? So let me testify from that perspective to say that there seems to be something happening, something that's resonating around the world. And most of you, I think, are aware that we've been doing a lot of work around what's called futures literacy, a capability, not a method, a capability. And some of you will be aware that right from the beginning of my kind of introduction into the more formalized, well, it's pretty informal, but formalized futures community, I was always very disturbed by the implicit sliding into the kind of glissement, or you kind of, into the future exists, let me just find it. and that even when, thou doth protest, no, the future doesn't exist, uncertainty's there, etc. Fundamentally, you could feel the motivation, the desire, the hope, the yearning to find the future. Let me put my hands on it. And as I tried to articulate my discomfort, in large part through kind of a critique of existing scenario and planning and strategic foresight and all that, and say, why are we only and so exclusively falling into the opposite of what we say as a disclaimer at the beginning of the process? The disclaimer is always, can't know the future, and the end of it is, hey, psst, psst, tell me which one's the right one. And you go, come on. Why are we falling into that trap? Why can't we resist it? Why is it so messy and inarticulate and inadequate? So over the years, it became, I think, apparent to me that we were really talking about a capability, and that's where the anticipatory systems work emerged, and the idea that anticipation is something fundamental to all living organisms, and therefore we can begin to discern different ways and reasons for thinking about the future. We can begin to distinguish ontologically the different kinds of future, and therefore we can begin to identify how people are actually using the future all the time in all the sorts of things they do, including evidence related to the diversification or the diversity of ways in which they use it. And so futures literacy became a kind of entry point into acknowledging, recognizing, reflecting back this diversity. And the thing is that, and many of you here know, that it's really quite hard to put your finger on it. So you're talking to somebody about the future, they're talking to you about the future, they're identifying the future, and you say, well, what kind of future is it exactly? And it's hard to put your finger on that, because we're not really that skilled at figuring it out, and we present it in a very messy way, because we don't make the distinction either, and that's fine. But I think we know that we're using the future in the context of uncertainty all the time. We really are. That complexity, as the unknowability of what's going to happen now, is something we really do engage with. And we do let go of our images of the future in order to say, aha, he's not on the stage, and you're not disturbed. I mean, it's an informal environment, etc. You all know me. But what I'm saying is that, that didn't even probably register at all, because you let go of that expectation. You just let it go. In other words, your futures were malleable, your futures were open, your futures were continuously being recreated and invented as things unfold around you. So we do anticipation for emergence all the time. We just don't talk about it. We just don't identify it. We just don't make it into something that's meaningful in an explicit way. And so I think what's kind of happening around the world is the inadequacy of humanity's relationship to its capacity to imagine, and I can talk about that, but that inadequacy is an opportunity. It's the shadow that's not evident from the light. When you look at the leaves in a tree in a photo, there's the part that's illuminated, and then there's the part that's not. There's the shadow, and that shadow is something that we're kind of, pulling the leaf away and saying, where's the shadow? Oh, the shadow's there. Now I can't see it. Then I can see it. Now I can't see it. I can see it. And all this discussion, the wonderful talk by Bio around chronofeminism and the liminal and the in-between and the relational that's constantly relational, and not just relational like on a binary or even multiple, but it's relational on the level that I'm here physically. So I've got a physical relationship going at the same time as I've got a words and language relationship. So I've got all these relationships are constantly and being fluid. And it's not that we want to kind of formalize that and get everything to be analytical and make sure that I can plan my way through all of it. But I think that humanity for a very long time has been grappling with this question of how do we construct our security? How do we construct our sense of confidence?
How do we believe we're being responsible for each other, for our children, for future generations, for our, our neighbors? And I think through a kind of complex emergent evolutionary process, power got entrenched in the idea of security related to planning and related to monumentalism, related to legacies and continuity and permanency and preservation. And I think that's true in the imperial city in Beijing, that's true in the pyramids of Yucatan, that's true all over the place. That for a variety of reasons, human communities became monumentalist, fetishized with immortality, frightened of birth and death, the birth of something that might threaten me because it will grow up, the fear of death because I won't be here anymore. And as a result, we've really just kind of ignored and been unable to tap into the anticipatory systems which we have and which we use all the time, but we don't pay attention to, we don't listen to, we don't feel. It's like, you know, a spectrum that we just don't see. And I get the sense that in the world today, because we're experimentalist, we're always continuously experimenting, all the time. I mean, we do sometimes better when we're children and we're open-minded and we play. And, you know, we have to learn to play again. But it comes back pretty naturally. And that the playing that we're doing today, or let's say the experimentation that we're undertaking, faced with our dissatisfaction, our sense that, you know, there's just something not right here. There's just something that's not sufficient. It doesn't take, it's not, I want more. But what is it? How do I get there? That experimentation that's having, and there's also obviously the open critique, which says, you know, why are we still defending systems that are going to put more carbon into the air? I mean, what exactly are we doing? Why can't we kick the habit, as it were? All of that is creating a fertile environment for cultivating, for doing some gardening around anticipatory systems. And I've had a marvelous, and I've been very lucky, set of opportunities to be able to explore and pursue this inquiry, my own curiosity, to test my ideas. And as I've been doing that, obviously in huge interdependence and you know, emotional, psychological, intellectual with all of you, we've been building up networks and communities and ideas that have some continuity, that have some shared meaning, some shared sense-making. And so the Global Futures Literacy Network, as we call it, because we have to put labels on things for convenience sake, the Global Futures Literacy Network, which is made up of all of you, in a sense, which is made up of the member states of UNESCO, who are going to be presumably approving a resolution which calls upon the world to celebrate International Futures Day on December 2nd. And under the umbrella of International Futures Day, celebrate futures literacy as a capability. The UNESCO chairs, which are in future studies and in futures literacy, all of that is alive. It's living, right? And if it's living, it's not just, you know, it's not just me, it's not just UNESCO, it's not just WFSF, it's not just, it's all of us, and it's obviously the fact that we make it living. A language is alive when people speak it. Futures literacy and anticipatory systems is alive when people inquire about it and explore it. So, I was frustrated and felt critical of the futurist community ever since I joined it. And I still am. I think there's things we can do better. I think there's things that we can share and develop and cultivate better. That's because I have anticipatory systems. I have images in my head of what better would be like, and I compare those speculative fictions to the way things are. And all I'm trying to say today, and then I'll stop, is that I think we have an opportunity, but that opportunity is just a fantasy, but it's also, of course, and it's not just my prerogative, but it's an invitation, obviously. And I'll end on the kind of sharper note. It's an invitation in my fantasy to really dive deeper into what I was talking about at the beginning, which is this diversity of reasons and methods for using the future. And if I want to say it in a way that I've been saying it quite a bit for years now, let's give up on scenarios. Scenarios, Hollywood produces scenarios, everybody produces scenarios. If people come to futurists for scenarios, you know, it's in a sense saying, I don't want to be able to read and write myself. I just want to go and hear somebody else tell me stories. Now, there's nothing wrong with that per se. Of course, we want to do that. But in a certain sense, because stories are so important, for instance, and the ability for you to tell your own story and to understand how stories influence you and change the way you see the world, from the point of view of creating the capacity, the capability, the conditions for freedom, the idea that people can exercise and discover meaning in their lives themselves, that capacity to be free, you need to be able to understand stories. You need to be able to relate to the things that structure the way you see and act in the world around you. And here, anticipation is central to that. And so, I don't want people coming to the World Future Studies Federation for scenarios. I don't want people coming to futurists for scenarios. I mean, the Delphic Oracle, who was more, hallucinatory and mystical than strategic foresight, which is kind of an interesting take on that as well. There are lots of people who are going to say, make the world great again. There's going to be lots of people who are going to say, this way of doing things is the best way, and follow me. But I think everybody here knows that what's crucial is that people be able to have a greater capacity in their own lives, in their own context, in their own community, to understand where their stories come from, where their imagination is shaped, how that imagination is put into effect, and what it changes in terms of what they see and do and how they relate to the world around them. And so that's, in some senses, my aspiration for what I see going on in the world around me from the perspective of the Global Futures Literacy Network and all of its different components, and that includes the World Future Studies Federation, which, from my perspective, is the future studies is about studying anticipatory systems and processes. Anticipatory systems and processes produce images of the future, certainly, but that's not really what studying the future is about. Future and scenarios are a dime a dozen. There's millions of scenarios. What's crucial is to understand why and how we anticipate. And I hope that the World Future Studies Federation, in my fantasy, becomes one of the key movers of this. And from that perspective, there is a I don't even know how to call it, but in a sense, the study of anticipatory systems and processes is a very mainstream activity. It doesn't need to be esoteric, exotic, or special. It's just like statistics or studying, chemistry or biology or whatever, anthropology, political science. Future studies, as the study of anticipatory systems and processes, is a very conventional and mainstream activity. Now, it might not touch some of the aspects of going beyond anticipation for the future that I said are too limiting. So it might be quite conventional to mainstream future studies. But I think also it opens up the possibility for more people to do things that are outside and explore the diversity. And so my point here is that, as I was saying before, we all use anticipation for emergence. We do it. We are engaged in anticipation for emergence all the time. And I think even if there was a mainstream university-based study of that, it would enhance our ability to understand and use it and diffuse it and legitimize it. So I feel that mainstreaming future studies as the study of anticipatory systems and processes, what we call the discipline of anticipation, is really a worthwhile objective. And I think it's something the World Future Studies Federation can achieve if we put our minds to it. Thank you. We did start a little bit late, so.
Thank you very much, Riel. This may be the first time that I fully understood you. Now, I had to think of, we were in Germany, there were elections in Germany a month ago, I believe, or so. And I read a really interesting interview with one of the politicians of Die Linke, so left party. And what she said struck to me, because she said part of the problem that we're seeing is people being confronted with global change, drama, refugees coming over to Germany or anywhere in Europe. And what some of the sort of progressive parties are missing is that people have a deep need for tradition, for keeping the same, for understanding the environment, for understanding just the thing they were used to. And I felt that. I understood it. I mean, I love thinking about the future, but I also feel privileged, right? We talked about privilege before. We are privileged here to take the time to think about the future. And there's a lot of people who don't take that time and who feel scared. And I was just wondering, what do we do with them?
Great question. Thanks. Another really, really good reason to enhance our anticipatory systems. Because, I mean, let me just flip it around, and most of you have heard me say this before, but I mean, what kind of craziness sets us up to think we can control the future and that that's the way I'm going to feel safe and happy, right? I mean, it's an invitation for psychosis, really, because it doesn't work. You're just going to sleep poorly. Oh yeah, I'm controlling the future. Who believes that? And so the issue becomes, okay, you say, and this, some of you, again, you'll hear me, we have to change the conditions of change. That's why I like the literacy metaphor, because when you teach children to read and write, you change the conditions of change. When everybody has a cell phone, you change the conditions of change. And it seems to me we cannot get to this a healthy relationship to continuity in all its many different forms, including tradition, including knowing what's going to happen. We will never get to a position where continuity enters into our way of being without enhancing, changing the conditions of change, our capacity to understand anticipation and the way anticipatory systems work. In other words, the person who is mystified by somebody who can read a text because they can't read and write, and who think, wow, it's magic, and they learn to read, they change their relationship to that mystery, to that unknowability. And I think we can fundamentally change our relationship as a species. And I'm talking about all humans. And there are some communities, and I've said this a couple of times in the last little while, but I was on a call the other day, and they were talking about the languages spoken in their region, and the languages that were spoken in their region, they claimed, I just took it on face value, they said in these languages, 7 out of 9 in the region, there's no word for future. Now, I don't know what the implications of that are. I'm not an anthropologist, etc. But the point that I'm making is that I think that the only way we're going to be able to deal with this, oh, please, help me ensure that the traditions are preserved. Which traditions? Going to the outhouse? Not having a toilet in the building? No, that tradition we can deal with. I mean, what traditions? Why? What are we preserving? How do we know that this, really need to preserve this chair? In 30 years, this chair is going to be super important for what? How do I know? In other words, our whole relationship between time, past, present, and future continuity, my interpretation of what's important in the past changes completely when my idea of the future changes. The past is mutable. As Bio said, you throw a stone and it kills a bird yesterday. This is it seems to me, the only way for humans, because we're a pretty strange creature with these really overdeveloped brains, to put our capacity to imagine to use in a way which offers us some form of positive relationship to the world around us, to a universe that is complex, emergent, full of surprises. And the last thing on this point, which I think is also fundamental, is that, and it's you know, it's connected to all sorts of things, travel, but also values, and we celebrate difference. We make appeals to tolerance. But if you can't interpret difference, if difference is like, whoa, what is that? You know, I want continuity, I want something I know, I want to be familiar. I have no way to sense and make sense of difference, and I have very few ways to understand how difference is really an unbelievable resource. I was just on a call right before this with Indonesia, the disaster risk reduction, UN disaster risk reduction in Indonesia, and their perceptions of security, their perceptions of fragility, their perceptions of defensiveness. You know, build your castle, build it stronger and stronger and stronger. And then you're inside your castle and you're super secure. What way of thinking about the future? At least I can control the thickness of the walls. Huh? You know, is that the way we're establishing our relationship to the world around us? And is our understanding of our, I mean, we don't have any words for it. We are part of this universe. We're not separate. Yet so much of our language and way of thinking distances us. And as a result, we do crazy things. Just a point on the, and this is, you know, this is about the planning versus improvisation, and, you know, can you be so spontaneous, and aren't we responsible for future generations, and what is long-termism and all that. But we have a lot of radioactive waste that we need to deal with. We produced it, okay? And we have to plan for that, because you can't just let it wander around. But so I'm not opposed to that planning. But I think the challenge to us, and I'm talking here in this room right now, is we should never be doing those kinds of things again. That kind of decision to create radioactive waste is an unbelievably arrogant, unbelievably abusive way of relating to the world around us. And I don't know what it would mean or what it would be like for human societies to be in a non-abusive relationship to the world around us. I think there's some indigenous communities that are like that. I think it's radically, radically different, inconceivable, in fact, in some ways violently disturbing, because it abandons our idea of progress. It abandons our idea of making the world a better place, of always becoming better and better and superior and achieving and winning and and it's really, really difficult. And I've said it actually a couple of times in the last two days. I know I need to die before that kind of change can happen, because I'm a carrier implicitly in my language, in the way almost everything I do of that other way of relating to the world around us. But the planet has given us because it's the planet's the representative in a sense of this natural world, and it said, you know, you guys are out of your minds. If you do want to be resilient, and if you do want somehow to use that intellect to actually be somewhat active as agents, fundamentally changing your relationship and your position to the world around you seems to me to be the only way to begin that kind of process. And just to tie it into our analytical way of thinking, what I said before about difference, and quite a few have heard me say this before, is that a priori, if you bet on 10 horses, one of them will win. A priori, if we look to diversification, because we can embrace difference and we can generate difference, because we're better at dealing with difference, change, not tradition, not continuity per se, then perhaps we're also going to be more resilient, transformative, adaptive. But I say transformative, not knowing what transformation is, because transformation is unknowable in advance, but knowing that I'm in transition, that I'm letting go of where I've been and I'm experimenting with somewhere that I may end up. So that's not a quick fix. Sorry, I'm taking too long to anything else, or I don't know, when are we out of time? Doesn't matter. Yeah, Martin.
Just a quick question, connecting to Bio also when he came up with chronofeminism. I just wonder, why is it futures literacy and not chrono literacy? Just marketing?
Go for it. I mean, I say to people, I'm not sure I'm always credible, that I really don't, the words are not what matters to me, and I'm definitely open source, and it's definitely something that's evolving, okay? So there are problems with the word literacy, there's problems with the word future. So, I don't know, let's experiment. Yeah, I mean, Rumiana says there's problems with the word chronos, or yeah. Chrono, yeah. Other thoughts,
I don't know if this is actually a question or more of a thought, but I keep thinking about what you said, that you need to die because you're a carrier in order to be actually seeing this change on how we see the future or the anticipation capacities. So what I think that we should be doing as a federation, as futurists, or as people who are trying to promote future thinking, is to go with the kids. And that's one thing that for me, I don't think we're doing enough, or I don't see that it's a lot being done, because we are a lot about corporations and probably governments and but the seeds are there and are kind of brand new. There's little kids that are just getting concepts, and we are just replicating the same concepts of everything. And I don't see a lot of projects, and please, if someone knows about it, let me know, to just go to the source. Like, don't listen to me, don't do what I'm doing. You are going to be brand new.
So I was doing this thing in Indonesia just, half an hour ago. And one of the questions that came in over the Q&A was, I teach young children, what should I do? And it's been a question that obviously has been in the forefront and the background. I mean, I've been thinking about it for a long time, actually. And I think I have two elements of a response that are obviously just incomplete and kind of moving in that direction. One is that children are testing specific anticipatory systems that are very crucial for survival. And there are things like, you touch it, it's hot, you don't do it again. So I anticipate that the heat will hurt you. You cry, you get fed, you cross the street, you look for a car. I mean, lots of really simple survival-related anticipatory systems. And they're also doing that with their body. You know, if you look at little babies, the way they're, you know, they're testing all the time, and they're like working on figuring out, if I do this, if I do this, if I do this, then that happens. And then when we start to move into adolescence, I won't talk about adolescence as a label, but just when you get past 10, 12 years old, you begin to play with systems and situations that are full of ambivalence, full of ambiguity, full of unknowable in advance outcomes. And we don't do any sensitization for that transition. In fact, we do the opposite. We say to them, the teacher knows the answer. Go for certainty. Go for certainty. And you invest in your education because it's going to make it. You look for the person because you're going to, and we simply invite them to completely abandon the experimental approach, but also to reinforce the idea that elementary anticipatory systems are the only kind of anticipatory systems there are. So the little answer that I gave in the sense of doing what's appropriate at specific ages in the context of what you're able to exercise is to obviously create situations where there's continuous voyaging, where young people are invited to take voyages and to pull learning to them through experimentation, and to include in that discussion, and Thomas, you probably have a thought on this yourself because you've been doing it with children, is that how to get them to test and draw attention, not just to the fact that they've learned to do something that's in the books or learned to do something that's going to get them into university, but that they've learned something that actually deals with their imagination. And, you know, when we talk about imagination, so often, oh, creative industries, yeah, it's a good job, you know, there's lots of, you know, and it's all this functional, utilitarian, target-oriented thing. So I think we can begin to understand better anticipatory systems, and because we understand better those anticipatory systems, we can begin to create situations where we exercise and draw attention to that and build up those capabilities. So I could imagine a generation of young people who, when they reach university, are not going to be, you know, completely riveted with fear by the fact that they don't know the future, but instead think, oh yeah, I'm here because I'm going to explore, I'm going to become better able, I'm going to prepare for I don't know what, and that's cool. Because the I don't know what is going to be inspirational, the I don't know what is going to be amazing and weird, but I have the capacity to sense and make sense of it because I don't have a fixed idea that despite the fact that there's all sorts of things happening, I'm going directly to that job that's been based on my diploma kind of thing, you know? So it's not that we can't do it, but we're not doing it. Yeah. Go ahead.
If you just ask me, then just a short note in terms of the children. On the one hand, it's completely true that by age they have a different kind of notion of the whole thing. So on the one hand, first of all, yeah, shall we finish?
Then you get out of here.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Don't colonize our
I'm
future.
Dutch.
He said slowly.
Yeah. But you are invited. Yeah. Now, so one point is that on the one hand they have no notion of future. So it doesn't mean anything for them. So the time perspective of children is completely different. So when you are creating images in terms of fairy tales, in terms of anything concerning the future as well, it's not the future for them, but it's very much the living, the very present they are, even if within the images. This is one thing. And the other thing that with us who are filled with, you know, plans, strategies, and one, if you want to test it, go among the children and teach them at the age of 6. this is what happened to me. It's my experience, you know. You have a very clear plan what you are going to do with the children, and 9 times from 10, yeah, it was just garbage. It was just garbage. With Martin, we were just talking about it, that, you know, it's frustrating with, let's say, a university or a researcher background to go there, because children do not mind at all if you have a PhD, if you are skilled, if you, nothing. Even it doesn't count how your yesterday happened, because, you know, I went, oh, it was an excellent day, but nothing counts. You are tested there at that very moment. And yeah, and the point is that even if I have, let's say, ideas, what will be the future is emerging just there at that moment. And it's wonderful to stay in front of the emerging something and let yourself be surprised of what is emerging. That's a wonderful experience.
Thank you. I just want to say, so as a designer, Stephanie, as a designer, those things are really crucial, huh? What are their temporal frame? And by the way, different parts of the world, people have different temporal frames. And the other thing is, yeah, what are their expectations and pretensions about what is going on? How do you create the environment for acceptance and non-acceptance? And that's wonderful. But I mean, it is really true, of course, that if your temporal frame is based on a very short period of time, there's certain things you can't really evoke. And we need to understand that. And it's not like there isn't childhood education and studies about all this and cognitive development and all that. But we need to layer it with anticipatory systems thinking in order to improve the way in which we understand the role of anticipation and imagination in what we see and what we do. So that's why future studies is the field that studies anticipatory systems, to put it into that context. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, again, a lot of inspiration. Actually, also we had a really good discussion on the future, on the next generation, and there's some graphic recording of that. And through this, I also had the feeling like maybe we need to connect through personal stories. You said scenarios are, I'm going to say trash. No, I'm saying that. But I think we still need them in a sense as stories. If we see them as vows, I don't feel like we totally need to throw them out, but I think we need to put them in perspective. But I feel also yesterday there was a few where I always had the feeling we always look at the macro, we're looking at the meso and whatever and all those levels, but we never look at those personal stories, or very rarely, and even our own personal stories as so-called professionals. And I'm wondering, for me, for at least, Futures Literacy kind of opened up that door. And I feel that there is something that we can connect on, and that's actually, for me, has been kind of a key to see also future differently. Because all of a sudden, I don't have one position, and I fly into different, but I have many positions in the now, in the present, to have many futures past whatsoever, because it doesn't really matter. It's not where I'm going, but where I'm right now, and see what I'm doing now, to work with whatever there is to come.
Thanks, Stephanie. I'll end on this point, which is that I think that it's important, particularly in the current context, to construct any effort towards some sort of scientific mainstreaming in a way that is open to different epistemologies. And so, for instance, even the notion macro, meso, micro, it's hierarchical, it's causal, it's determinist, it's objectivist, etc. We need to be able to break out of those epistemic ways of knowing in order to diversify our ways of knowing. And so the personal, the community, but even the way we make sense of that and try to make sense of it. And so I hope, there's no assurance, but that the notion of an anticipatory systems processes approach to thinking about our imagination is epistemically open, not just one way of knowing it. Anyhow, thank you very much. Really appreciated having the chance to talk with you.